How do you manage, organize, and present visuals in your worship set at your church? We'll talk about it today. Hey, ministry leader, welcome to Your Visuals Matter, the podcast where we are helping you visually communicate the gospel. On today's show, we're talking more about your worship slides and how you can make them better. This week, we're going to go super in the details of the best ways that you can manage your hard drive, organize your software library and media bin. We're also going to talk CC/LI, copyrights and licensing, how to set up your slides, choosing motion backgrounds, transitions, and more. All that is coming right up. As a church leader, you've probably already realized that Easter is early this year, so now is the time to start planning. If you want to see more visitors at your church this Easter, I encourage you to download the free How to Get and Retain Visitors Easter Playbook from our partners at outreach.com. This short PDF offers a wealth of ideas and information about reaching your community, welcoming guests, and keeping them engaged with your church. You can download it today at outreach.com/playbook. That's outreach.com/playbook. Hey guys, we're going to have two guests on the show this week. First up, I welcome my friend Roberto Lopez. Roberto works as a sales person as well as tech support at Renewed Vision, working with churches around the world on how to get the most out of ProPresenter. Here's Roberto. Roberto Lopez. Did I roll my R? Okay.
You're getting to the very good Hispanic thing going there.
Yeah. That's right, buddy. So, man, I was geeking out over your Star Wars stuff. I love it.
Thanks, man. So the one behind me, which is the prized possession, was actually a gift from the company, particularly Brad Weston, for my 7-year anniversary with Renewed Vision.
Nice. So Renewed Vision honors you with the Star Wars painting. That's awesome.
Yeah, Mandalorian and Grogu, and he said it was a depiction of me and my grandson.
Nice. Have you been to the Star Wars land at California or Florida yet?
No, I've been to Galaxy's Edge and at Disney World, but I haven't ventured across the other side of the Mississippi yet.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I thought it was cool. The Millennium Falcon is really neat. I don't think Florida was open yet when I went.
Okay.
I went to California, so I saw that one, but I hadn't seen the Florida one yet. But it's quite an experience.
Yeah, they get a couple of extra like roping around characters and things like that because they are in California, and so the studios are there. So I guess they get a little bit more action.
Yeah, I got in trouble with the stormtrooper. I was taking a picture of something, and he got onto me, and I thought it was for real at first, and then realized, wait a sec, this is all an act.
Yeah,
because he had a handler with them that was that was also in on the act, but I didn't know.
It's an interesting job to be one of the bad guys casted there, because it's basically you get paid to annoy people, insult people, and be mean. So I know a lot of people that would qualify for that job, but
complete opposite of you, though, my friend.
I could make believe it. I guess fake it till you make it, right?
Awesome. Well, man, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate this. Tell folks what you do at Renewed Vision.
Currently, I serve for the tech support team. So if you email, if you're on chat, or if you make a call, then I'm probably going to answer one of them. I've been at it for just shy of 10 years. So I'm sure I've talked to a good bunch of your viewers during the course, if they are ProPresenter users, which in my understanding, based on numbers, we probably are the grand majority of your viewers.
Yeah. So before we kind of dive in, what's the craziest tech question that you've gotten? Is there one that stands out?
Okay, curveball. Let's see. I wasn't thinking of that. I think it's not mainly like an actual like tech issue. It's more like I would like to do XYZ for some apparent reason. Or actually, look, this is probably the most common one, or not extremely, but it's people that just daisy chain everything. Is like I'll ask them, I say, "Hey, I have a signal problem. Okay, tell me how is everything connected?" And they list like 20,000 adapters and plugs.
Yeah,
and I'm like, why? Simplify yourself. The least you have, the less the possibility of something not working.
right.
I had one the other day that had like 7 points of contact between the computer and the projector. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Simplify that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So I wanted to have you on to really talk about how to manage and organize your visuals within your presentation software so that everything is on their desktop. There could be 5,000 things on their desktop or in their downloads folder. And so I think if sometimes people were to just kind of stop and go a little bit slower and organize things, that it will go better for them. Do you agree?
No, I agree 100%. I mean, and I'm going to use my volunteer tech director hat for my church. I mean, because we're a small congregation, so basically a tag I'm it. I mean, I only have a handful of volunteers, so based on my experience, that sometimes the pastor will go like, "Hey, can you buy this? And we're going to show it Sunday, whatever." If I don't put it in the right place now, that it's easy to find, and come a couple years from now, and it's happened. This has happened. The pastor will go in and can't find it and say, "Oh," and purchase the same one again, because I didn't take the time to say, okay, this is the structure that I'm going to create for saving things. And basically now, if you don't find it in here, then we don't have it.
Right. I think that's good stewardship all around too. First, let me ask you this. What kind of computer should I look into getting before I get my presentation software? So what kind of computer should run my presentation software?
Loaded question. I get this question asked a lot. And I have to be as truthful, but also very not committed when you answer this as a software company, because there's a lot of value and cost involved to all this. But nowadays, with every presentation software, not only the company I represent, we've become so advanced in how much software can do nowadays that it's not a cookie cutter answer anymore. So I always have to ask questions before giving any type of advice in regards to how many screens you're going to use. Are you going to live stream? Are you going to do this, and that? So the overarching information I'll give you an idea of is not for everybody, because there's going to be congregations that might need something a little bit more advanced or XYZ. But generally speaking, most people, like if you're in the Windows world, I mean, you want to be in a comfortable spot, i7, i9 computers, 16 gigs RAM, dedicated graphics card. Doesn't have to be extremely robust unless you're going to say, oh, I'm going to do 4K or 1080p's or whatever. So most cases, 1 gig of video RAM is good. And on Mac, it's different. And basically, any good M1 Pro or M2 Pro will pretty much cover the grand majority of scenarios. And in that case, you just look at models because of your need, how many outputs you need. So then you just look at Mac Studio versus Mac Mini versus iMac, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. So, the big question on everybody's mind is how much does it cost? How much should I spend? So give me a ballpark of, if I'm setting up my tech space, whether I'm in my adult space or kid space or wherever, what kind of money should I be targeting to spend on, let's say, hardware, and we can go into software too, like a computer and software to put it on. What kind of money am I looking at?
I would say, even looking at some, because I do keep up with other software in the market as well, looking at every price point that's out there. And the basic computer, you're generally going to be in the $2,100 to $2,200 range minimum, in my opinion, because you're not going to get a $400 laptop from Walmart and expect to run something very effectively. You're going to have to go in and design or look at something with good specifications. And even on discount, like, just as an example, I just ordered a Lenovo because it was on sale for testing, and even because it was discounted, it was still $950. I mean, and that's just for standard testing. Imagine if I wanted to get something for the church, it's going to be like $1,400, $1,500.
Right.
So on average, it's like, and if you go with like the Mac Studio, baseline is $1,500, and so,
right.
And then you add about $400 to $450 for software, give or take. I mean, I would say you're comfortable in the $2,000 to $2,200 range.
Total.
Between
I
computer.
I would probably, to be conservative, $2,000 to $3,000 total.
Right. I mean, and we're just talking about software and computer. We're not talking about everything else.
Correct.
So
Correct.
Just on the computer, about $1,500 or so, give or take. But yeah, and about $400 to $500 on software. Yeah.
Yeah. I want people to understand that, because we serve some kids ministry leaders and other folks that are still into bringing their own laptop from home, trying to kind of hook it up and do, and are asking, is it worth the church to spend the money to set me up with a computer that's stationary and the site license for
absolutely.
Yeah.
For two reasons. Yep. One is that, and my pastor said something to me the other day. I do a lot of basically everything for the church. I mean, and I spend about 2 to 3 hours a day for a week running new network wires for security cameras. And he said at the end of the game, he says, "You need to write me an invoice." I'm going like, "Why?" He goes, "Because it is the right thing to do. It's your personal time." It's the same thing with your computer. It's your personal computer. Right. The church needs to have ownership of that computer, because if you're not around, you go on vacation, you're not going to leave it behind to somebody else use it. It's not the right thing to do. They need to invest because it's the ministry. You're not the sole ministry leader. The church is the ministry leader.
Right. But my church doesn't have the funds, and we found a good deal at Walmart for a laptop that we can use for $800.
Possible.
We can just make do for that, right?
Again, depending what they're actually going to do. In most cases, look, if you have an old, like for instance, you could probably imagine how many laptops I go through. I've used some of the old ones at church for years, because the only thing that's going to be happening is playing a couple of videos, a week via one HDMI output. There is a possibility. You just got to look at how you're going to use the computer and and even most people, look, ProPresenter users, specifically, I will tell you about 70 to probably even higher number than that, just 70 as a number, don't use 10% of the software. Because all they do is just run still images, one output, and that's it. And yeah, then you can say, well, I'm gonna use a cheaper one now while we save money for something in the future. There's wiggle room for everything. But it's about longevity. I tell people, I say, look, you could plan your budget. You could plan anything you want. But the question is, do you want to plan for a year or two or for 5 to 10? So, because this computer today might cost $500, but in 5 years, it may cost $2,000. So you got to figure out, is it worth paying a little bit extra now, because maybe in 5 years, it's going to cost twice the price.
Right. All right. What kind of space should my hard drive have on it to house all the media content for my presentations? Any computer specs, whether that's space on the hard drive or other things? What are computer specs that you would recommend?
Again, we have to divide by what type of church we are, okay, or organization or whatnot. If you are the type that uses motion backgrounds, bumper videos, sermon intros every single week, and you're not the type that wants to be deleting things very frequently, like you want to archive, then you're going to be in the upper tier of this conversation. But for the typical church, like for me, I ran with a 512 gig hard drive for probably 5 years, and didn't even get to 75 to, I think I got to 68% of capacity in 5 years. But as we evolved, now I have a 1 terabyte hard drive, and I have 50% of it already full, and we've only had this computer 2 years.
Yeah.
So things evolve. So the big thing is that you could go as high as you can financially, and if all you could afford is 512, then you're that, in that lower tier where you just use a couple of motion backgrounds or just still images and things like that, you would be fine. If it's a budget thing, because in reality, you just need the space to house what you're going to use. Right. I know churches that have a 512 gig hard drive, but then later on decided, okay, we're going to invest on an external one, and whatever we don't use, we're just going to take it out of the computer and store it there, but we know it's there and we can look for it in the future.
Right.
Because, you don't want to house like Easter for the whole entire year on the local hard drive if you're only going to use it once a year. If that, because sometimes you don't even do that. You just get a new one.
Yep. And those external hard drives are so cheap now that you can load up on those. Okay. Talk to me about organizing my media on my computer. How should I start to set up my files and folders so that we don't do what we talked about earlier, and that I have, a million things on the desktop, just clutter everywhere on the desktop or download folder?
Drives me crazy, Carl. It drives me crazy.
I know, me too.
I am so OCD, ADD about it. I do screen shares with some folks to check on their computers, and when that screen loads up and I see that desktop like plastered, I'm more like, I feel like like anxiety coming over me. It's like, oh my Lord. The urge not to fix it for them is very high.
I know.
Yep. So what I started doing, and this is basically based on my personal experience at church, what I started doing many years ago is that I created just one single folder on my computer. I have it in my documents just because I don't like too many stuff on my desktop. And that was called the main media, whatever you want to call it. And in there, I created several, I probably have 17 subfolders, and they're all categorized by the overarching theme of media. So I do have one that's everything driven for announcements. So, a lot of JPEGs of Tuesday, Tuesday headers, calendar headers, things of that nature. And in there, I also have seasonal announcements. So I have subfolders in there like all the images that are announcement driven, that are for fall, Easter, or seasons. I have one called like depictions of Jesus, and in there you have one of crosses, one of Jesus' names, and it's just broken down.
Wow.
And my people might say, "Man, this is really OCD." I say, but it's really the only way I can find that I found that works.
Yeah,
That
you
I
kind
can
of have to.
tell my worship pastor who's not computer literate, or my pastor who is somewhat computer literate, he's getting better, to just open a folder and search very easily on the hard drive and say, oh, okay, we have that. Or they could enter the name in Finder and search it and find it very easily.
Right.
So that's how I do it. And if we buy a lot from producers directly, like from Skit Guy's website, Igniter Media's website. I'm not a big user of wholesale media sites, unless they do custom work, So I rather buy directly from Skit Guy. So I have a folder that says Skit Guy videos specifically, just for that. And that's how I do it in the hard drive itself. Then I mirror that to my ProPresenter media bin. Now, this is a lot of work up front.
Yeah.
This was tedious to have to sit there and create a playlist folder with the same name as the subfolder, then create playlists for each individual category within there.
But once you got it, you got it.
Right. So once you do that, it's a matter of every time you buy something, drop it. So I drop it so you download it from their website. I'll put it in the folder in my documents, find the place it needs to go. Then I import it into ProPresenter in the right place. So even just opening ProPresenter, worship pastor, or my volunteer can easily just go through the folders and go like, okay, this is the Skit Guy video, or this is so-and-so's video, or this is so-and-so's video they're looking for.
Right. Good. Okay, so you organize that where it's the same on your hard drive as it is inside of ProPresenter. So the media bin matches the folder on your hard drive.
Yeah,
right?
Basically, if you put them side by side, like if I open Finder and show you the tree, it looks about 90% the same as it does inside of the ProPresenter media bin. Because there's going to be some naming variations and so on and so forth, but for the most part, it's identical.
So once you're inside your media bin, is it labeled like, how do you organize it by producer? Do you organize it by here's my motion backgrounds, here's my countdowns, like product type? Walk me through how you organize that inside of your media bin.
So producers are mainly, I'll do a producer folder or put a media playlist for a producer if it's like very specific. And we'll pick on the Skit Guys again because they're great people. I have one specifically that says Skit Guys, and all their videos are in there because they're all sketch videos. So it's very, very centric. It's very intentional. Now, if we go to the other side, like I have a folder that's called very dumb name, Things for Worship. So this is the biggest one, the biggest structure, because it is a lot of abstract things that go behind the worship lyrics. So there is, in this folder that says Things for Worship, that one has a long list of playlists, and they are titled, and they're divided between motion backgrounds and still images. So I have the motion backgrounds in their own, and those are divided in somewhat color variations, like red hues, blue hues, RGB hues, basically. And so they're within that spectrum, and they're all still. So imagine RGB stills, RGB motions as an idea. So that's the concept of that one. When it's very abstract, I do it by color. when it's like the one related to Jesus, then I have a playlist that said that in ProPresenter that when you click on it, you're going to see everything that says crowns. So it's all images that have crowns in them. I have one also called Nature, a folder called Nature, and in there's one that's a playlist that's called Clouds. But that one is divided in two. It has two of them: clouds daytime and clouds nighttime, like sunset. So that you're visualizing if there's a song that needs this XYZ background, you can just by reading what's in the media bin, the titles of these playlists, you're gonna get inspired to what to put on there or what you're gonna find.
So you're very, very detailed when it comes to this. So
probably
I think a question
more than most.
That's a good thing, though. I think that what people might be thinking, though, is I don't have time to do that. That's overkill. Or why do you prioritize to spend the time doing that? So why is that important?
The importance was in the long run because in my first years there, we were purchasing a lot of duplicate content for no reason whatsoever, other than we didn't have the time to search for it. Or, like I said, at that moment in time, I've been at this church for 17 years. So at that moment in time, probably I was the most computer literate person serving in staff, right? I live in a small country town, so we're not very big. So as the years went by, I had to spend the time and say, I have to figure out how to make it easy for my volunteers and for the staff, because I'm not always going to be there. And I have to make it a way where they can pick up the torch and go with it and not call me. How do I do this? Where do I find this? Do we have this video? I'm going like, that's kind of dumb. I have to fix it.
Right. Right.
So
I think you need to be. I think it's good for your volunteers. I agree with you.
Yeah. And so my goal was to not intimidate volunteers. That they can sit down and easily do something without feeling any anxiety of having to show up on a Sunday to do something, find something, put it on the screen, XYZ. So I didn't do this in one shot. So what I basically did is, because I'm a volunteer, so I'm not at the church every single day of my life. So what I did was I took out one of my external hard drives, took it to church, copied everything that's on the church, and I literally fixed everything a little bit at a time, and then basically went one day and replaced it all. The advantage was that I did it in between ProPresenter versions, so I decided to start, this was back in ProPresenter 5 age, to start from scratch. And that's when I started doing this whole process. And I didn't sit down for like 13 hours and do this. Trust me, I don't have that time.
Right.
But if you set up a plan,
over time.
Yeah, you set up a plan, you just work through it and take it home with you. And if you don't have an external drive, man, they're pretty cheap. I'm sure if you if you make a church property and say, hey, I would like to get myself to be able to transport stuff, an 5 gig external drive, I'm sure the church will take care of it for you. I mean,
what about tips for songs? How do you manage your song and presentation library? We kind of talked about the media bin, but let's kind of move over to the side here and talk about song organization and presentations. How do you organize that so that you can recall them very quickly?
Well, the beauty of it right now is that with Pro 7, there's no limitation on how many libraries you can have. So you can be extremely organized. Back in years prior, not only ProPresenter, but EasyWorks and MediaShot, it was just basically one dumped section where everything was just in alphabetical order, which, just made it challenging because you just had to scroll forever to find something in the letter Z or something,
Right.
Now, most of the new versions that are coming of every product in the market have the ability to organize this section a little bit better. And ProPresenter 7 is no exception, where now at my church, the top one is announcements. So every announcement goes in there. Then the second one is sermons. So every sermon script that I've ever built goes in there. And then the other one is, the other ones are more inclined to worship. So these are, I don't have as many, but I help a lot of local churches. Like our Methodist church here has contemporary songs in one, hymnals in another, and so on and so forth. And it's just a matter of what type of flow service you do. So some churches might have 10 of the libraries, some might have 2 or 3, but it's important for me. And I think your volunteers, your viewers, their volunteers will appreciate if you took the time to put each one in its own library, so that when they say Amazing Grace, you don't have to sort through 200 sermon notes, titles, or your announcement loops or whatever. They just go to that section. And if you do different types of services and your volunteer serving in contemporary, he knows that person is only going to know, oh, I'm going to look for it in the contemporary library because that's the version they want.
Right.
It is also important about naming conventions as well of files in regards to songs.
Speak to that.
Yeah. And this one is tough because in the years I've served and trained other churches, communication skills are not the greatest in the world between techs and the worship team or the worship leader. So that's something we have to strive to do better in. But basically, you have to have the naming convention that matches what the run sheet does. So as a small church, we do a lot of choral arrangements. As you know, Carl, choral arrangements are made by multiple producers. You got Clive Davis, you got so-and-so, you got Travis, So an example, I have one song that 3 different producers have arranged that song. So the lyrics are different. So my worship pastor came up with a plan that even though that song shows up 3 times, at the end of it, I have the initials of that producer. So when he does his run sheet and sends it over, it says XYZ song, JD, I know I'm looking for Jerome Davis. So in the library in ProPresenter, I have it written just like that. So it's super easy to find.
Good. All right, let's get into copyright information. So in managing your visuals, yeah.
If you would have told me this ahead of time, I would have said, no, I'm not going to come on and talk to you about this.
Yeah, I know. Everybody hates this topic, but copyright and licensing is a big deal. So tell me about how to make sure my songs are registered with CCLI, kind of manage it, the management and organization piece of making sure that I'm legal.
So that's a kind of so the first thing is that as good stewards, we all should have a license agreement with CCLI. I mean, not only for the benefit that you can download the songs to your presentation software, and this applies to if you only use Planning Center, if you only use Proclaim, if you only use everybody has integration with Song Select. It's like a given, right? But if you're not aware, that's how songwriters actually make their income, because you paying that pays their royalty every time you play the song, and it might be a couple of cents here and there, and the copyright police is not going to come chase you down and knock on your door or nothing like that. But it's important for us to do the right thing. So please, If you don't have one, get one, because you're using somebody's song that somebody else wrote, and they should have credit for that. But off that soapbox, right? So how do we do? The cool thing is that when you have CCLI and you download from them, you're already covered. You're getting all that information. You're getting your CCLI number, which is basically your contract number with them, that you're paying your dues, and from those dues, the songwriter is getting their share every time you use that song. So that's perfectly fine. When you're bringing it from other sources, outside of CCLI or multi-track, which is just a whole nother story. But it's the same concept. They do the same. You subscribe. They help you with the CCLI, with the copyright licensing information, and you're covered. Now, there's no easy way to do, like some folks will do, like copy and paste from Google, which you shouldn't be doing because you're not paying somebody's dues, but that's another story all its own. So now the only thing important, well, not only thing, but when using multi-track or CCLI, everything's being recorded now, where every time you use a song, the software tells the CCLI server, this song went through on XYZ date. So they know already. So you're covered regardless. The biggest questions people ask, do I have to show my CCLI information on every single slide or every single song or on my live stream and so on and so forth? And the short answer to that is yes, you should. But unpopular answer is the copyright police is not going to chase you down. The part that is very kind of, look, if you ever look at the sheet, Carl, have you ever tried to read the CCLI agreement sheet? Nobody does. No. All right. There is only one section that I've kind of memorized, and I summarized it. Is that all you have to do is you have to tell people that you have a contract license number with CCLI and that you sang XYZ songs. They don't specify how you need to do it. So some churches...
Do you think can you put it like, a lot of churches will put it as a slide in their pre and post service. Do you I kind of like that way best. That way it's not, and technically the end of the song.
Technically you're covered because it only really says that you have to mention that. I've seen churches where they have a little plaque at the big entrance of the worship center that everything that is sung here is covered by CCL license, blah, 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 blah.
I like that option the best. Like, get it off the screen and somewhere else.
Right. But in the world that we live in with live streaming, everything's changed. So
yeah, that's true. So, but if you did that in your pre and post service loop, you're covered.
You're covered. So,
which I like it better there than at the end of each song. I think it is kind of distracting.
I particularly as well, because then there's the thing where, at least for us, we can't make the distinction of what's on the slide in regards to CCLI. So some people say, I don't want to show it on my live stream, but I want to show it in-house. And we're like, I'm sorry, right. You either have to show it on both or none. Because good. We have to make it so that you are showing people that you are doing that song. So I give them the other option, either that or do a post and pre-loop and make a slide that says all the song titles and say, all these are covered under so-and-so's licensing.
Yeah, good. All right, so what about other licensing I need to be aware of? For instance, limitations. I can't take from Google and rip down images from Google and put them up on my screens. Mm-hmm. I can't pull in YouTube clips, movies, things like that. Kind of just a very short version. Kind of walk me through the a reason why, and what's wrong with it. Nobody's gonna. What's wrong with it?
This is a moral dilemma question. All right. Mm-hmm. In regards to do or don't do. So it's funny to say that YouTube content is copyrighted, and therefore you should not download any video. But if you actually go into YouTube and search videos, how do you download from YouTube? You actually get videos that tell you how to download from YouTube. And technically,
Right.
you should not be doing that according to their rules of engagement. You know, their end user agreement states that they owned all those videos, but hard to police, right? And look, if Igniter Media, or let's say you, for instance, Carl, you know, with Church Visuals, you posted a 2-minute video, bumper video, as a promo, and somebody liked it, and they used a YouTube extractor and then used it in their services, they're disrespecting the work that you did. So,
Correct.
So
they are.
So this is a moral dilemma more than anything else.
It is a moral dilemma.
Because
it is.
You may seek retribution for it, but that's a lot of work, and you may not. I mean, it's kind of weird.
Am I going to go after that church or whatever for that? No. But it is kind of, I would say it's more of a disrespect, or more of a, it's a moral dilemma. Here from the producer end, here's what that is. That is, if you were to take something on YouTube, download it, but that particular video is sitting on our site ready to be purchased, you've now gone the free and illegal route to get that piece of content and skirted around paying us for that content, which means we have less money to create more resources for the church.
Yes.
So this is not like we're over here trying to sit on a pile of money. That's not really the case. It is more like we do need resources in order to make more resources. So it's more that, it's more just like a moral thing that, like, you're really stealing from us. Can you please not?
Yeah, and
it's really that.
But if we really want to go deeper into that, isn't it biblical that every worker should be paid his dues? So you worked, worked creating that visual. You should get paid for it.
And the same is true for a movie. The same is true for a Google image. Like, the same is true for all of that. Even if you don't know the artist and there's some way, even if you can't find the artist, like if you pull something, you have no way of contacting that person, you still should probably not use it.
Correct.
If you
and go you know, and at minimum, if you can't find the artist, and I had this situation several years ago, I found a piece of art that I wanted to incorporate to a whole kind of art element I was trying to design for somebody, and I couldn't find any contact information. So in my credit notes for when I finished that project, I actually, to this unknown artist that I found on Google that just goes by this name, thank you for your contribution. If you have any questions, please reach out. You know, I gave him credit, even though I couldn't physically get permission, but it was such a cool piece of item that I took the chance. Now, I'm not saying do that, but I took a risk.
It's really, do you want to, are you showing an effort?
Right.
You know, are you showing an effort to reach out? Are you showing an effort to give credit and pay for that artistry? So, I think that shows a whole lot to that producer, that you searched after me. You tried to give me credit. You tried to give credit where credit is due and pay where credit is due.
Correct.
That goes a long way, especially because if not, if I don't see that and hear that, then it just looks like you've stolen from me.
Exactly.
Whereas if you've sought me out, then there's a conversation there on my end to go, you know, okay, I see what you're trying to do here. How about I'll help you? Like, thanks for giving us credit. Like,
Yeah.
it helps the conversation.
Yeah,
So,
in the media world, look, and I know we're getting outside this whole realm, but in the media world, there is a ton of beautiful content out there. Okay, so as someone who also edits and does work on the side, I have to. I mean, it's hard to sometimes go like, man, I wish I could have created something like that, and instead of replicating it and calling it my own, I would say, hey, I'll reach out to somebody and say, hey, do you mind giving me authorization to do a placement on this, and I'll give you credit for it in XYZ video that I'm doing, because you're helping them also promote their work,
correct.
So, yeah. So, and the Google thing is, look, not only because of copyright and doing the right thing, I've seen people and this is the technical support side of me, download something from Google and put it in their media bin and completely mess everything up because they don't know where that image is coming from. I had one case in particular back in ProPresenter 6, which was the weirdest thing in the world. They put in an image from Google and it turned the thumbnails of every image they had in ProPresenter 6 to the same image. And as soon as I hunted down that one file and removed it and restarted the program, everything went back to normal.
Right.
So that Google Images is a double-edged sword for many reasons, and I would stay away from that as much as possible.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's kind of land here. Two last quick questions for you. What is the most common question that you get when doing tech support for ProPresenter? Most common question.
The most common question? How do I get my outputs to turn on? It seems dumb, but it's basics. Look, a lot of times we don't tell basic stuff to our volunteers. And sometimes you're on vacation and they're like, why is there nothing on the screen? Well, you have to tell them how to do that. There's a reason for it. It's a very basic common question, and it's everything output related in that category.
Yeah, good. All right, last question for you. Why does visual media and how you present it, and you work for Renewed Vision, ProPresenter, you're in the game of presenting visuals every week. Why does that matter? Why does presenting your visuals well matter? Why do your visuals in general matter?
I'll sit here and give all the credit to our mutual very good friend Luke McElroy and say that we're here to enhance the service by telling a story visually, not distracting from the story. That's why it's important. You pick the right subtlety, the right size. Look, I tell people, I say, it's okay not to use the background if the moment in the church service calls for it. Mm-hmm. Not because you bought something for $9.99 means that you have to use it every single week. Sometimes you just don't.
Right.
We're here to help tell the greater story. So picking the right media, the right background, the right colors, you could tell a grand story all its own. I mean, as an example, one Good Friday service, I used red the whole entire time. But the thing is that I used from the subtlest red color on the first song, and just every first song after that, just raised the hue of red, until you got to the final glory one where, and then because you're helping telling a story, you're just not randomly picking stuff. You're not going to have, look, I'll tell the story and I won't say the church, but I visited a church and they were singing this great song, and the person who was running the media had a floating sailboat in the middle of the ocean, just swaying to a song that had to do about the Lamb and the cross. Come on, people. We have to use common sense. We're helping to tell the story. So that sailboat ruined my whole entire experience because as a media guy, I was like about to lose it. My wife had to tie me down to the chair because I was about to run back there and just take control. Dude, what are you doing? Yeah. Don't distract people. You just help lead them to that greater story. Yeah. You read the words to the song, you read the sermon notes, you figure out where he's going and help people get there.
Good. Man, thank you so much for this. Great information. And I love how detailed you are. Perfect to come on to talk about how to organize your visual media. So, man, thanks a lot for your time and for your friendship. You're the man, Roberto Lopez.
Soon enough, you'll be Hispanic with all that R rolling, my friend.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, man. You have a great one. Blessing, bro.
Hey, ministry leaders. Jake Mozart here from the Church Visuals team. I serve as a ready-made creative director. I just wanted to encourage you that you are doing a great job and don't grow weary in doing good. Your work for the kingdom matters. How you communicate the gospel matters, and that's why we take such great care in helping you present God's word with high-quality visuals. It's a pleasure to serve you as you serve your community. Your visuals matter. We're with you. We're praying for you. Keep up the great work.
Hey, friends. Today, I welcome the legend, the ProPresenter Yoda, to my Luke Skywalker. Steve Dirks is in the house. Steve is our executive director at Church Visuals. He serves on our team serving custom clients and in multiple other capacities on our team. He's also a master at ProPresenter and helps churches around the country with the software and helping them present their visuals effectively. Here's Steve. My man, Steve-O Dirks. What's going on, buddy?
What's up? How's it going?
And thanks for coming on. Why don't you tell folks kind of what you do for our company, our ministry, and just kind of give people, we talk every day, all day long, but some of the folks out there don't know, who you are and what you do for us. So give us a lowdown.
Sure thing. Steve-O. I do everything and anything that's needed on our company, on our team. So really the main thing that I do is custom media. So I'm helping churches just like you or people who are tuning in. If you guys have an idea or a vision, I'm helping you from start to finish get that accomplished with our team. I'm not the one who actually designs or does your work. I'd like to clarify that I'm not the actual brains behind the operation. I'm just the muscle. So I'll help you get whatever direction and vision you want, communicate it to our team and have them execute it. And then I'll get it back to you and I will take over understanding your timeline so that we can either meet or beat your timeline. So that's what I'm primarily do. And then I also dabble in delivery on our website, helping Carl manage other items on a day-to-day basis. But the primary meat of what you'll see me doing is our custom work. And that's my pride and joy.
Man, you're great at it. And I appreciate you so much. We've talked the last couple of weeks on the podcast all about presentation software. So we've kind of taken a deep dive into which presentation software is right for my church. We've also talked to staff members at ProPresenter and Easy Worship and Media Shout. And so we've been heavy into presentation software these last few weeks. But I wanted to have you on because I wanted to you to kind of maybe put a button on the end of that kind of presentation software discussion. So maybe kind of walk me through your opinion, maybe kind of give me the lay of the land of what you think, what's out there and kind of where you land on what presentation software might be great for a church.
Yeah, sure thing. I mean, I think one thing to frame the discussion is I'm a big proponent of ProPresenter, but a lot of that's just because that's all I've ever lived and breathed. So I'm a Mac guy from years ago. My family started PC and I started in that track and then I kind of went back and never went back. So when I got into that years ago, 10 to 15 years ago, ProPresenter was the only option for Macs, which is not the same anymore, but that was kind of how I got into it. And so when you were a Mac-based person, you always use Macs. That's changed now. And I love to say that really finding a presentation software that works for you is about your church and what's right for you. There's a lot of great things about ProPresenter. I'm a ProPresenter geek, and I could go on and on and on about why I love it, but it's not for everyone. I have a deeper understanding of computers. I have a deeper understanding of working with computers, and I'm not scared to do things. And so some things that I think maybe are a little more complex to people are a little simpler in other softwares. And so I think it's a matter of understanding, what do you need to do as a church? What do you need to do as a pastor with your pastor in your church, and then build to that. I do think you should be on a presentation software of some sort, because PowerPoint is not the best option for that. So we can figure out a solution. But really, I love ProPresenter because it's robust and powerful. It not only powerhouses some of our biggest events, it came out of the Passion movement. So the Passion conferences kind of helped spark the initial ProPresenter designs. And so it has the ability, with every iteration in 7 that's out now, has the ability to do a lot of complex stuff. And I help churches on a weekly basis. One of the churches that I was on staff at before coming to Carl, we do some complex stuff in their room, all powered by ProPresenter. So I love how robust it is, how powerful it is, but it's also something that can be pared back. I love that it's also a tool that can be simplified. So if you're at a church with just one screen, it can be simplified to run a very simple setting. And so that's why I love it, is that it's kind of a Swiss Army knife. It can be customized to do whatever you need it to do, and do almost anything that you want to do well. You have to get to a very high level of production before you start to go above ProPresenter and need other tools as well. So
what do you think about Pro 7? So as of this recording, Pro 7 is what is the latest version of ProPresenter. Give me kind of a general overview. Obviously, this was a big step from Pro 6 to Pro 7. Kind of walk me through your feeling, and maybe the kind of the word on the street, the feeling on the ground of Pro 7.
Yeah. So when ProPresenter 7 released, I think a lot of people initially had like a reaction to it, because it did change. It went from a very bright software, white based, to a very dark based software, which allows you to just see the content that you're presenting in color. So it changed a lot of the layout. It changed a lot of the way we navigate on things. And so I think that freaked people out. As I dug into it, I realized that a lot of the stuff is there. It's just in different spots. And so kind of like one thing I do with churches a lot of times is I'll spend 30 minutes and I'll just go through the layout. And so if you actually, shameless plug, if you want to check out our ProPresenter 101 course, I'll spend one session just going through a layout of explaining what every part of the screen is. How do you understand where the different pieces are? Because to me, that's the first hang up that I heard, was that it's different. I don't know where anything is. Well, it's different, but here, let's explain where things are, why they're maybe there, and how that helps with you with moving forward in your presentation. Personally, the features that I was most excited about with 7 was there was some different cost structures put in place, but I think honestly they actually help churches, because you get the ability for ongoing support, ongoing updates. But then 2, like all the modules and stuff are built into Pro 7. So while there was an initial cost up front and an ongoing yearly fee, the modules, the alpha key modules, are built in. A lot of these modules that you need to do stuff, MIDI modules, are built in. Whereas with 6, you'd have to buy those, you'd have to purchase those. And when you went to purchase the alpha key module, which the church I was at years ago did, it was $1,000. And so to do 2 machines, have a backup, we were at $2,000 just to buy that module. So sending alpha channels is something that was a game changer, and being able to do that effectively and quickly within Pro 7 right out of the box was awesome. Bringing feeds in to ProPresenter is still something that I don't think a lot of churches use, but there is the ability to, within 7, I think if you are a smaller church, run a host environment before your show and after your show, and you can do that all within 7. And if you ever wanted to know how to do that, I could show you. But within 7, you can bring feeds into your computer, not only sending stuff out. Screen management is far and above, way different than it ever was. You can manage multiple screens. You can create displays to show those screens. And so I can manage 3 or 4 different screens with one window, instead of, whereas ProPresenter 6, it was very limited to kind of cycling through the 2 screen options you had. So those additions alone change the game. And most of those I use on a weekly basis. I mean, alpha channels, I'm using weekly. Screen management, I'm using weekly on a weekly basis.
So speaking of screens, I want to kind of get into some details there. Maybe some of this can be a little bit rapid fire, or kind of maybe in the weeds for some people on slide composition, but I want your opinion on this. So talk to me about choosing fonts for my worship slide, all slides. What do you suggest? What are some standards when it comes to fonts on my worship slides?
Yeah, so with worship slides, I'm always suggesting you do a sans serif font. And the best way to describe that is, really, serif fonts have the trails and things on their ends that are nice in design, but they can sometimes create readability issues. And so you always want a font that's simple, that is clean, that is easy to read. Because really, let's just talk, just a personal thing for me. Why do we use ProPresenter? Why do I use ProPresenter, and why am I a fan of it? I want to help bring unity to worship. And so I want to bring a unified worship experience where everyone in that room knows exactly what to sing and is able to join in singing. Because when we do that, I find that lives out the Psalms of bringing people together and worshiping God in a spirit of unity and praise. And so as I build out worship lyrics, I'm not always looking for a design factor to it, even though we can get into that there actually are some really cool things that I do at times with designing some slide looks and stuff. But really the key is this, make sure it's readable, make sure it's clean, and make sure it's not overpowering, because that's the other thing too, is you want it to be in a good balance with what's happening on the screen. So 2 lines of text and sans serif fonts is how I build out worship slides. Now I would say for sermon notes, I'm a huge proponent of trying to match your graphic. So don't just slap a background up there and have the same old font that we've used for 20 years as a church. I prefer to, if possible, add a little creativity to what you do with sermon notes. And that's where you can bring, hey, we're using, Gotham for our sermon graphic title. Let's go ahead and load Gotham into the computer. Let's go ahead and build out some templates that have the Gotham font. And that way, when we put scripture up, it matches the look and feel of our title graphic perfectly. Because in that setting, in that situation, I'm not as concerned with readability, because those slides are going to be up for a longer period of time. When I'm snapping lyric slides, I want it to be as readable as possible in an instant for people to see.
What about lines of text on worship slides? What's your limit as far as how many lines?
Yeah, my limit is 2. I have seen it done really well with 4. There's a couple churches I follow that are in in an old style worship sanctuary with a projector in the middle, and all they do is present lyrics, and so they do 4 lines of text, and it looks really good. I think what I say is, I can see examples where 4 could be good. I will say that I very rarely ever see an example of 4 on an IMAX screen. So image magnification streaming, it never looks good. So I would say for that, you always want to have 2. And then if your church is not streaming, which is a different conversation, but if you're not streaming and you're only presenting lyrics in the room, I could see 4. The reason that I don't love 4 and that I don't revert to it is, what I found is, when you put 4 lines of text up, what are people naturally going to do? I don't know. I know what I do, and I'll just confess here. I'm going to keep reading the whole slide and make sure I know what's coming, right? And so for me, I've found that 2 is a sweet spot, because it allows me to keep people engaged with what's happening in worship now, not trying to read ahead to what's happening next, but hey, let's just worship right now in this moment. Let's sing these lines. Let's sing this lyric. And so I found that you just get more engagement with worshiping in that way. It does require training your volunteers. I understand that if you're a church that's a 3-line or 4-line person, those slides are moving a lot slower than my 2. But I think it's a matter of knowing the music and being a part of the band of leading worship. And the way we can lead worship is tell people, hey, stop trying to think of what's happening 2 minutes from now. can we just sing to God this like line and like from our heart worship together right now? So that's kind of where I come from theologically, why I kind of feel like it's worth it. And then two lines just allows me to keep things clean on screen. It looks good. And I'll show you actually an example of, so I don't know if you guys can see. Oh, it's not working. Interesting. Okay. Well, I'll send this to Carl and we'll put it in the show notes. But there was a church that I was helping, and they had the original stock font that came out of ProPresenter is 2 lines, but it was gigantic 2 lines, and it took almost half the screen, close to half the screen. And so I always am just trying to make sure that our lines are readable, 2 lines, but they're not overpowering everything that's happening on screen, so that people can engage with what's happening in the room and on worship, because more than likely you're showing image magnification of your worship team on stage, and so you want them to be able to also be a primary part of what they're seeing. So,
what about size and color? Do you have preferences on how big the font should be, what color the font should be?
Yeah, I try to more often than not I default to white font with some people may disagree with me on this, but I like to put a little bit of a drop shadow, a little bit of a stroke on it to pop it out in front, just because a lot of times I'm dealing with camera shots and I want to make sure that those lyrics pop. I have seen white font, black font done well with a white background to it. I right now currently do a white font with a black box behind it. And that's just to make sure that readability happens. So it's just really dependent on, I think some of that's dependent on what your congregation not allows, but what will work with your congregation. So the church that I'm helping here in Butler, Pennsylvania, the font is maybe a little more rounded than the worship pastor and I would have preferred. And the font may be a little tamer than what we necessarily would prefer, but that's because we also are serving the people in our church who, would prefer not to be jumping to modern too quick. And so you kind of got to figure out that balance of what works. I will say that readability is key. So do things to get the font readable. So if you need to put a black box behind it to make sure that it pops in front of backgrounds, if you need to put a stroke or a drop shadow, do that. You're not going to always get away with just the words on top of any background. Like sometimes like other churches like Passion and Elevation and them may do, but they have a younger crowd. So you just got to figure out what works in your congregation and your environment.
So when you accept feedback from people who are like, I can't read them or any type of feedback like that, how do you sift that feedback through to make sure it still looks good on screen, but also serve your people well?
Yeah, I think a lot of times what I'll do is I'll elicit more feedback. So if I get feedback that it's not good, I'll try to go find people that are maybe in that age range and say, hey, here's a shot of what I did this past Sunday. Do you have trouble reading it? My wife is a good example I've used in the past. If I get some feedback, hey, did you see that? Was that hard for you to read? So I think getting multitude of counselors to tell you if they're seeing the same thing, because I will say that sometimes there's a vocal minority that will make a complaint, and I don't know if you necessarily want to change it for just that one. Right. But I also am a proponent of, like, if they come back and you have no stroke, no shadow, no nothing behind it, they say, I'm having trouble reading it. People around you say, I didn't have any issue reading it. There's some things you can do in ProPresenter that I feel like adding a little stroke and a shadow really isn't going to change a lot of what it looks like. And so what I would probably default is to, if it's gray and there's not a whole lot of feedback that it's either good or bad, and you want to try to help this person out and say that you're working towards it, there are some solutions I would try that maybe would pop the text a little more without having to add some sort of crazy background to it. So I think it's a matter of discussing that. If it's just one person who comes up and it's one Sunday and you've had the same font for 6 months, it's probably a background issue. It's probably something that was on screen. And so then it's just evaluating, like, is it worth changing everything we've done based on this one issue, or do we fix that issue? Do we look at solving that issue in a different way? So
what about line breaks? So want to make sure that lyrics make sense and we're not leaving one word hanging on the next row if it doesn't kind of make sense. How do you kind of do that to where it's consistent? What are your rules of thumb there?
Yeah, so I try to do complete phrases as much as I can. So my goal is to on 2 lines. I'm not just doing 2 lines of incomplete phrases. That a lot of times helps me with widows and orphans, because oftentimes you're not going to just have one word then at that point. So in my goal, I like to try to do that. I've found in the modern environment with smaller font that you can run with, it's very easy to get full phrases. When you start to get into some of the traditional environments I've done, where we've done larger text, then I've run into situations where we're now splitting a phrase into 2 lines. And in that situation, I'm trying to at least like leave a complete thought. So don't put Jesus on one line and Christ on the next. You know, my Jesus Christ, if that's the second half of the line, have the first half and then have my Jesus Christ or my Jesus. There's a song I'm thinking right now that the refrain is my Jesus, and I would have that. So I'd have something with Jesus so that it's kind of a complete situation. Don't just leave one word sitting on the bottom of a line. So yeah, I make sure you do that. I personally use the reflow editor, which is a ProPresenter 7 feature. Again, ProPresenter 101, I discussed that feature, but in that feature, you can actually go through it in a text format and go through your song and see how it's broken out line by line. And I can easily, quickly change how lines are delineated out. So I use that often just to kind of clean things up, because a lot of times if I go into a church, the lines are broken in weird parts, and I can easily just go to that editor and tab over, create a new line, and put the text that I want to be on that line correctly. So yeah, 2 lines is my go-to, and try to keep complete thoughts, complete phrases on each line, and that'll help you with not having widows and orphans.
Are you in all caps, or do you use upper and lower?
I am in all caps. Let's see how much trouble I get in here. I'm in all caps because this goes sound weird, but one, this isn't the reason I do it. A lot of other churches do it, so I think it's a kind of a modern trend. I do it because at times you get ridiculed for capitalization issues. Right. So for me, all caps takes all that away, because the only person that sees all caps is the person who's looking at a stage display. And if they want to come up and talk to me about capitalization, we can have that conversation. But yeah, so I back in the day with 6, there was no easy way to do all caps. You had to manually type in all caps. And I, for a lot of songs, manually typed it in. It was real fun then when we went to 7, and all those, I wanted them to be lowercase. I had to retype the whole entire song back so that I could easily change it between whatever I wanted. So with 7 now, you can easily set a theme and ask it to be all caps. I do all caps just to kind of take away an issue of contention. Hey, you didn't capitalize his there when it should have been referring to Jesus or whatever. I've had situations where a lead sheet has it put one way and then people think it needs to be done a different way. So for the sake of unity and not trying to, like, for those grammar fanatics who are worshiping and see the miscap, it'll probably piss them off for the rest of the whole entire time. So I just do all caps, and it takes that away. So
what about grammar and punctuation?
So I try to limit grammar and punctuation as much as possible. And my reason with that is this isn't a grammatical paper. So I don't want commas on the end of my lines. I don't want that stuff. But I'm probably not as hardcore as some, in that I do think grammar has its place. And so I think where grammar has its spot is it helps us understand if we're singing a phrase and there's going to be a little bit of a pause. Oftentimes in the lead sheet, you'll see a comma that will delineate those two. Right. So I will oftentimes, if it's in the middle of a phrase and I have the whole phrase on screen, I will include a comma like in that phrase, because I want to help delineate to people, like, this may not be just a run into sing the whole thing. There may be a brief pause there. So I will do that. I won't do exclamation points, question marks, none of that stuff. But commas, obviously, apostrophes referring to if it's Jesus or, King of King, things like that. I'll look at punctuation like that has to do with the word or a part of a sentence. But as far as the ending punctuation on the sentence, I remove all that. And I wouldn't suggest you do that, because I don't think, to me, the point isn't to have a perfectly grammatically presented lyric. It's to have a lyric that people are ready to sing. And so I'm not worried about it being perfectly grammatically on screen looking right. I want it to be grammatically correct enough and people understand that, hey, we don't include periods and question marks and stuff. Right. So that's what I do. I wouldn't say that I've been other places where they do include that. I don't personally love it. I think it's extraneous, but I wouldn't die on that hill.
Yeah, good. Talk to me about transitions, both text and background transitions. Do you cut? Do you dissolve? Mixture of?
Yeah, I personally cut, and I kind of got into that when we started doing iMag at the church I was at about 9 years ago. Personally, it just eliminated. The reason I went to it was because back in 6 with the alpha key, there was actually, like, when you would cut, when you would fade, you would see that alpha black thing happening between the letters of the words, and I just hated that. So I went to cut because it quickly and succinctly made the cut, and the computer would recognize that there wouldn't be some weird fracting happening on screen. Obviously, that's been fixed now. You could transition if you wanted to. I don't have a problem with it. I just personally prefer cutting. I will transition. Sometimes I will transition into a song. So when I transition a background on screen and then the first lyric comes up, I will sometimes, depending on the moment, transition that first set of words on screen and then transition the out on screen. I always transition with a dissolve my backgrounds just because I feel like we do enough jarring with the iMag. I want to do a fade and control how quick that fade happens. So with my backgrounds, oftentimes there's some sort of 2, 3, 4 second fade happening between those backgrounds on the big screen. That way it's not a jarring change that's snapping on screen. So I cut lyrics, I transition, fade, backgrounds has kind of been my go-to.
What about more hymnal direction rules? Repeat 3 times. What's your kind of stance on that?
Yeah, so this is probably one of my biggest proponents is ProPresenter has the ability, and it had it in 6 as well, but to make arrangements. So I'm not a huge music guy in the sense that I lead music. I probably will never see me on a stage leading music.
Singer, Steve. I don't know.
Yeah, I probably get booed off the stage real quick. But I do have musical background. I do understand how to play, guitar, and I took piano as a kid. So I'm musically inclined. And so I personally have always understood arrangements because I understood what that was about. That seems to be a concept that's not necessarily translated across all of us production ProPresenter people. But the arrangements are what your worship team's using to decide how they're going to do the song. So ProPresenter allows you to build arrangements. And so I always build my songs with arrangements. So what that means is if I want to do the bridge 3 times, I just pull the bridge in 3 times. I don't think that's something you need to, that's confusing for people, one, because if they come in and the second time you've done it and they don't know, well, now am I on the 3rd time? Am I on the 2nd time? Where am I? So I personally think that's confusing. So I think that causes more issues sometimes with people engaging in worship. And if one person has it wrong and then jumps the gun, he feels awkward. He doesn't want to sing the rest of the time. So for me, I would go to make the arrangement. If it says 3 times, then copy the bridge 3 times in the arrangement. And that way, when people are singing, they don't have to worry about, am I singing? They look on screen and go, okay, I'm singing this. Okay, I'm singing this. Okay, I'm singing this. And so to me, that's an area where we as lyric operators, production people, can take the ball of owning, leading people in that and not putting that burden on them to try to figure out and count where am I at, what am I doing kind of thing. So I would say no to that and use the arrangement function to your advantage to help you do that easily.
We've touched on this a little bit, but talk to me about leading lyrics. What's your rule of thumb?
Right. So back to, kind of the MO of why I do what I do. I want people to engage in worship. It's not some sort of show. And so the way I've always approached that is if I was at a show, I'd probably have the lyrics running in time with the music exactly when it is, because I'm probably going to more often than not watch it, not necessarily sing it.
Right.
But in church, I want people to sing it. I want people to enter into worship. And often than times than not, you're starting a service off, and what is the worship leader saying? Hey, join with us and sing. So the way that I have adopted that is second to last word. If you're training someone new, that may need to be third to last word. And what I've seen over the last 5 years with dealing with training with different churches is if they're brand new to pro and they're timid, you might have to speed that. You might have to, in essence, account for that lag that's happening. So my go-to is second to last word if I'm running. If it's a really slow song, I may start to tweak that. So like it really depends, my go-to is second to last word, depending on what environment and situation I may change that. So if we're in a church and I have a production person that I've worked with for a year and a half and they know my standard, we may look at a song and go, hey, that song is moving really slowly. I think you can do last word and it still be fine. And I might start to give some direction like that. But as far as starting off baseline, second to last word, I would rather be a smidge ahead than a smidge late. And the reason is because I want people to know what they're singing. They're not going to need to know what the last two words are on that slide, because more often than not, like, your brain has already read what that slide is. Right. But they do need to know what the first 5 words are in the next slide, because they don't know what it is. I mean, unless they're me, who I have some of these lyrics I have memorized so I can just start spouting them. But oftentimes the people in our churches, when we're doing new stuff that's come out recently, they don't know what the next set of words are. Mm-hmm. And so I would rather be a smidge ahead, leading them with, hey, we're going to sing this next. Hey, we're going to sing this next. Hey, we're going to sing this next, than too far behind. Because what I've found is that shuts people down. When I'm too far behind, people then go, oh, okay, I don't know what to sing. I'm going to stop and I'm going to I'm just going to consume right now. And oftentimes that leads to, if that's consistent, that leads to a whole service where we're just consuming, we're not singing. And so I've just found that in order to help our worship team with, hey, people engaging and singing, let's keep the lyrics ahead of time. That also helps your worship team, because your worship team is looking at a confidence monitor and they're wanting to see what's up next. So the worship team is actually doing even farther ahead than your congregation, because they know what the next set of lines are. They don't know what the probably next set of lines are. Mm-hmm. So as I transition ahead, they know what to sing now, and they also know what's coming up next. If they see that an instrumental break is coming up, they know that, and that may be an opportunity for them to say something, to think about what they want to say as they're singing this last part. So it's kind of a two-way street. I'm wanting to serve the worship team on stage well, because they're looking at 2 slides at one time, and I'm also wanting to serve our congregation well by presenting lyrics a smidge ahead of when they need to sing it. So
good. One thing that you're really great at is kind of the back end management of stuff too. How to organize my media bin, how to organize my local drive. So give me some tips there. How should I set up my folders and files, and should I offload? Should I do a cloud-based approach? Give me some tips there.
Yeah. So back in the day, when I was on staff at a church, we had a server on our church that we used for ProPresenter. That's where we sunk everything, and we synced all 3 or 4 machines that I had doing pro, our choir machine, 2 production machines, and a gym machine or a road machine were all synced together. And there was this network-based server that was a physical drive that we were syncing to. And I always recommended that. People I had who were in relationship with me use Dropbox, and I was always concerned about that for reasons of, if your Dropbox goes down, you're in trouble. So I always suggested you sync to a network drive of some sort, or a drive that's a physical drive you plug in. And the reason is you could sync all the files to that, have all those files there, go to another machine, sync those down. So the sync feature in ProPresenter is phenomenal. I can sync everything down and have that. So the church that I helped remotely in South Carolina that I was on staff at, I live in Pittsburgh here. So we sync to each other. I sync the files down. I get them ready for Wednesday on Tuesday night. I send it to them, and it goes back and forth 20 times a week. We're going back and forth with stuff. When 7 came out, 7 has the ability it stores the files on your computer, but you can sync from another cloud network. And so I actually have gone to Dropbox, and it works phenomenally well. I will say this, you need to, if you're syncing to a network device, understand that your time isn't instant. So when I sync to a Dropbox, it takes 20 to 30 minutes to get all that stuff sunk up to it. And then it's going to take another 5 to 10 minutes to sync everything back down to my other machine. So a lot of times there's 30 minutes to an hour of time that I'm waiting for stuff to make sure everything has sunk and finally finished syncing to that Dropbox. But you can sync down to your, and what I've always was concerned about with using a cloud-based system was that it was left on the cloud. And if something happened to the cloud during my service, I'd lose all my networks, my drives, my media. That's no longer the case. ProPresenter does have the storage in your documents folder. You can sync to that folder and it puts those files there. So even if something's changed on the Dropbox folder during a service, my stuff is still secure. But I do suggest you organizing your library just like you at home. Don't put your filing cabinet up and just stick every single paper in the one big drawer. You put some folders in there. I suggest the same thing. And that's going to help you as you go through managing your software, because this is a piece of software on a machine that is limited by your hard drive space and what you have available. So I've had many churches I've talked to who say they have issues with ProPresenter, and I'm like, when's the last time you deleted worship backgrounds out of your media bin? Oh, we're supposed to delete those? I have every single one from the last 7 years. Well, that's where you can start to run up issues with that. So what I always suggested was, have a worship background folder, have a folder for your video content, for your story video content, have a folder for slides, have a folder for these different things. And what that allows me to do when I was on staff, if you're on staff, monthly, bi-monthly, go through and clean out on a Monday. Don't do it on Sunday morning, but on a Monday or Tuesday, go through and clean everything off onto a hard drive, wipe it, start fresh, load in the files that you need, load in the configurations that you need. And then that way you're keeping your machine running at full peak capacity. I know some of you maybe are on staff at a church part-time. Maybe you're not even getting paid like the church I'm on staff at Pittsburgh right now. I'm just a volunteer lay leader. And you don't have the time to do that every single week. There's other responsibilities you have. And so what I would say is just a good rule of thumb is, hey, every 6 months, hey, once a year, if your machine maybe is a more powerful machine and you got the space, maybe you only need to do it once a year, but some point in the new year, every New Year's, after the new year is kind of turned over, take a moment, clean your machine up, put stuff onto a hard drive, and you'll find that you won't deal with lagging issues where it's having trouble or it's slowing down. So just constantly keep your machine cleaned up, just like you would your personal machine at home. You would constantly keep cleaning files up that need to be cleaned up. So I would just say you do the same thing with your ProPresenter machine. Good.
When you have consulted churches or people come up to you and ask you ProPresenter questions, what is some of the advice that you most commonly give out, or what are some problems that you continually hear?
Yeah, so the media management is one that I've heard a lot. The other thing with that, so the media part, like how do I take care of backgrounds that are slow or my computer's lagging? It could be you haven't deleted stuff out in a while. But the other thing that I see a lot of is not knowing how your media imports and not keeping track of that. I had a situation actually when I transitioned off staff at Shannon a year or so later. There was something that happened and they were continually having issues where videos were looping. And I don't think that there was a realization, understanding of how ProPresenter manages. And so ProPresenter 7 has the ability to default stuff as background loops that are constantly looping or foregrounds that stop. And you need to know how your machine does that. So I'm always telling people, you need to know what the default is at your church. I personally set mine to be foreground stops. And the reason is when the pastor walks in during the countdown and says, I need to show this video during my sermon, and you need to get it done, I can import the video and with confidence know that I can play that video and it ain't going to loop on me and it ain't going to stop and it ain't going to do something crazy. So I personally have said that's my default for that exact situation. And then what that means, though, is every time I'm prepping for the week, I have to know when I import 20 backgrounds, they all have to be set. They all have to be selected. They all have to be changed. And the setting has to be changed for them to loop, because if not, when we get to rehearsal, every single one of those backgrounds is going to get to the end and stop. So it's knowing how is your system set up? How do you as a team, don't just make the decision yourself, but talk with your team and say, how do you guys want to treat and manage this piece of software? And what's the default going to be? The other thing is the arrangement view, like figure out for yourself, what do you guys want to color things? Verses, choruses, bridges? Because for me, I had a system in place and I have a system in place. So I know Verse 1's always blue. Verse 2's always brown. Verse 3's always orange. Verse 4's always purple. Bridges are always blue. Choruses are always green. I can instantly look at songs that I've done at churches that I'm managing stuff for, and I can know instantaneously where the chorus is on that song. I know where the bridges are. I can look real quick. So using the arrangement manager, coloring stuff with the system allows me to quickly and easily make changes effectively and help guide some of that that's happening. Use a multi-view. I think a lot of people got inundated with not understanding how you could track all 4 or 5 screens. There's the ability in ProPresenter to create placeholder screens that don't actually ever leave your computer, and you can put your different screens there. So use that to your advantage. I would even go so far as to say use multi-views for your personal production team. If you can route a multi-view out of your computer to your production team and have countdowns for the first service starting, the second service starting, information like that, you can do all that within ProPresenter 7. And then I would say the last thing, the last two things. One, add actions beforehand. So if you know that you need a stage display to change it, you're welcome. At the start of every song, you want to make sure the stage display is set. Add those actions in your rehearsals. That way, when you get to Sunday, they're all automated. When you click on the slide, all the actions happen that you want. That's a huge time saver and also a huge game changer and stress reliever on Sunday. And then the last one seems simple, but I've seen this a lot. I'll run with lyric operators and they're trying to click with their mouse or they're trying to click with the space bar. And I always tell people they're trying to hit with an arrow key. I always say use the space bar. People will look at me and go, why? And I go, you can't go backwards with the space bar, you can't go up with the space bar, and you can't go down with the space bar. But if you're over in the arrow section, you can hit one of those. If you go up or down, you go up or down in the playlist. And when you hit go next, now you're in that song. So I've seen situations where someone's not paying attention. They hit up by accident and they think, oh, okay, I'll hit next. And now they're in a completely different song, triggering a new background, starting a new song, and they don't know how that happened. So I always tell people, have your hand near the mouse, understand where your cursor is. If you need to jump to stuff, I understand why people want to do that. I do that myself. But when you're actually transitioning slides, don't be trying to do it with the mouse. Don't be trying to do it with an arrow key. Use the space bar, and you're not going to be going backwards. You're going to know I'm clicking the next slide.
Good. Okay, so the reason why I want people to know all this ProPresenter stuff is because it matters how we present our visuals. So we work a lot at Church Visuals to produce ready-made content, to produce custom graphics and video for folks. And our training arm is all about helping you present those visuals well. And so ProPresenter is a major piece of that, along with other presentation software that we recommend and have some training for, Media Shout, Easy Worship. But we want to give you the training that you need to present visuals well, because we could give you a great graphic, but if it's presented on your screen where it's stretched or pixelated or nasty, then it's not presented in the way that it could be for maximum impact. And so that's why all this stuff is really important. So Steve, I'd love for you to maybe speak to that. Why does visual media, how it's presented, why does all that matter? Why do your visuals matter?
Yeah, I think as I've thought a lot about that over the years, I think the reason visuals matter is we have a God who creates visually, and he communicates visually to us. I mean, just look at the creation account. I was impacted recently looking through that, but after every single day, God looked at his creation and saw it was good. So he looked at it, he analyzed it, and he said, it's good. We look in the Bible at how God revealed himself, and he didn't just reveal himself in ways that had no visual element to it. He reveals himself in the burning bush. He shows himself in the pillar cloud of fire. He reveals himself to the people of Israel when he crosses the Red Sea and holds the water. Miracles that, the plagues in Egypt were visual representations of frogs, visual stuff that happened to people. Jesus feeding the 5,000. It wasn't just he did talk about salvation, but he also showed physical representations. And so I think we can glean from that, knowing that our God created us in his image. And so we have that ability, one, to create visually good things. But I think also just practically is none of us none of us just look at stuff that's bad and go like it's distracting. I mean, if we go to a concert and pay money to a concert and it's horrible, it sounds horrible and it looks horrible, we're probably walking out the door and we're not happy. And so I think there's an element to sometimes we almost throw the bag in and say, well, it's the Holy Spirit's job to move, so therefore it doesn't matter what it looks like. And I think that's unfortunately not living out the way that God's created and intended us. He obviously doesn't mean for us to create as an act of trying to save ourselves and make ourselves great, but he does give us the ability to create. And so I think as churches, production people, we create visual, stunning experiences, not because we're trying to pat ourselves on the back, but because we have a God who created everything and who holds it all. And so we're pointing back to him by creating things that are done excellently, because we're saying that's who he is. That's who he is. That's who he always will be. And so we create things well for that purpose, to one, display who he is and what he's done in creating us. But then I think more importantly than that, it's also to like, we don't want someone to be hindered in seeing the gospel because of poor, like, well, I'm just not going to put the effort in. Now, if there's a legitimate reason you can't do something, that does happen in churches, and that needs to be conversations that happen, and there can be ways to get around that. But like sometimes we just mail the bag in because we're like, yeah, I'm not going to put any more effort or time into it this week because I don't want to. And so I think sometimes we can do a disservice to communicating the gospel on stage and in our screens because things weren't thought out. And so things aren't clear. So the lyrics aren't thought about because I don't want to spend any more time with them. Well, now people aren't able to engage in worship. And so it feels like, well, man, this just feels like I just walk in, I plug my computer up, and we don't care about what we're doing. The sermon notes look like they were thought about 2 minutes before. Man, it seems like it's not really that important to engage in the Word of God. And so I want the Word of God to be presented clearly and effectively. So I want every sermon slide to at least be thought through for a specific amount of time, whether that happens on Thursday or Saturday night. But I want to take some time and make sure that I'm crafting stuff for it. And I want to make sure that my lyrics and everything that's happening on screen is visually communicating to people what we're trying to communicate as a church well. Not to try to pat ourselves on the back, but because there are people that are hearing and responding to what's happening in the room, possibly for the first time.
So, random story here. So, this past weekend, my wife and I took our 2 young kids to a monster truck rally, to a big arena, right? And it was put on by Hot Wheels, which back in the day, me and you, like Hot Wheels was a big thing. But now, so we're in this big arena, Jumbotron. There are, on every side of the Jumbotron, there are jerseys hanging right in front of the Jumbotron screen. And so every camera shot that they took, they were doing trivia on screen. You could not read the text on screen at all. And there was lots of dead time in the experience where like even my boys were looking like, what, like, is there anything going on? There was opportunities for visual engagement that were just totally missed because they were doing something else or directing you in an area. And there was lots of distractions that took away from the entertainment, took away from the moment. Now, obviously, Hot Wheels Monster Truck Rally is not of eternal significance. But I use that example for us to say, if our screens are bad, if our visuals are bad, it can be a distraction, and it can be a point where people miss the message. If there's a jersey in front of your Jumbotron, you're going to miss the message of the gospel. Now, whatever that is, that might be for you putting your PowerPoint slides together 30 minutes before service starts. Right. But if it is a distraction, it will. What more of an impact could we make if the jersey is not in front of the Jumbotron? If we don't do our things last minute, if we pour energy and intentionality into it. And that's how I felt with this Hot Wheels thing. It felt like this was big in the 90s, and they're still just trying to suck the money out of whatever, juice was left in the lemon. And my boys felt it. I mean, this was a 11 and 13-year-old boys that you would think that they would be into monster truck rally. Nope. I mean, it was like, this is kind of lame because they missed moments that they could have. Anyway.
No, and I think we have an opportunity, and I like to, recently kind of been on this kick. Like, we get to join with the worship team. A lot of times we'll hold the worship team to an expectation of excellence, that they're the ones who kind of lead the whole thing. And I think we together can hold that line. Yeah. So, in my church, our worship leader is doing a phenomenal job. He's recently transitioned in, is doing a phenomenal job leading. But as part of that, like, I have to support him with good lyrics. Like, if people don't know what to sing, there ain't going to be any worship going on. So that's where I think people need to understand, like, we're a team together. And just as you want your musicians to play excellently, not because you're looking for some sort of award, Dove Award, but you just want them to play so that it's not a distraction. In the same way, I don't want anything that happens visually or audibly to create a situation where people are more focused on that than they are the message, where they're more focused on that than singing, or they're more focused on that than what Jesus is asking them to in that moment. That doesn't mean perfection. Like, hear that from me. I know that sometimes we as churches can promote this level of excellence that's like screams perfection to everyone. I think it looks different in every situation that you're in. Yeah. I'm at a church right now where it looks very different than the church I was at in Columbia. I think it looks different in every situation, but I think there can be excellence in any situation. And I think it just requires intentionality, thinking about it, being someone, like you said, Carl, who are you walking the room and thinking, like, how does this look to other people? How do other people engage with this? Are you watching the people in your church and saying, are they engaging, or is there something I need to do different? And there may be things that you need to tweak to customize for your church that aren't necessarily protocols that everyone would suggest, but it's what your church needs. That may be something to discuss. Don't be so rigid to this is what I have to do and I'm going to do it. Like, be someone who's like, what does my church need and how do I get them to be worshipers of Jesus?
Good. All right, let's end with this. So we have just scratched the surface on some of these questions, and I want the audience to know you've heard some repeats here from the last couple of weeks. We've had Paul Allen Clifford on, we've had Roberto Lopez on, we've had some others, and I wanted Steve's take on some of this too. And I also wanted to dive into this because, Steve, you have a complete course on this material and more, where you set kind of a beginner level and then walk into some of this stuff in a lot more detail. You want to talk about the course some?
Yeah. So 9 sessions on really just starting from the basics, like what does ProPresenter look like when you open it up? And we're going to go through, how do you manage media? How do you manage slides? How do you create themes? How do you create looks? One thing we didn't get a whole lot into, but we'll do this in the courses, and actually in 201, I'll go more into looks, but I use looks to be able to change and do different things and change screens around, all within ProPresenter. They used to have to be done with crazy switchers. So I try to touch the surface of some of that in 101. It's just kind of an introductory. Hopefully that's something that would help you and your church, your team. If you have a new person that's learning ProPresenter, I would hope that watching those 9 sessions would help you get a good understanding and be ready to be dangerous in the ProPresenter world. And we have more on the books. So Carl already has me slated to do 201. So at some point when this releases in 2024, we'll have a 201, which will be more advanced stuff, where we'll talk about how do you use looks, how do you change things up, how do you use multi-screens, how do you manage those things, even get into how you can use video inputs to help with your worship environment. So,
yeah, good. Well, yeah, that course is available. ProPresenter 101 is available right here on the training platform at churchvisuals.com. So be sure to check that out. Steve, you did a great job with that course, man, and I'm really excited for more and more people to get a hold of it and to learn, because I think me and you are always surprised, and maybe this is a ding. I don't mean it as a ding of people going back to the basics. How do I do stuff from the ground up well? And I think you tackle that very well in the course. So I think people diving into the course are not going to be overwhelmed. They're going to, it's really practical stuff that they can use and take away. So good job.
Yeah. And I mean, the goal with that is, if you walk away and there's questions, let us know. the ProPresenter is one of those things, like, we need each other. We need community to get better. We need a community to know how to do things differently. Shoot, I was at a conference 6 months ago with Brad Weston talking about a specific feature, and he taught me something that I hadn't even thought of. So I think that's the beauty of our space, is let's be people who press into each other. If my, 7, 8, 10 years of experience with ProPresenter would save a church hours and hours of work, I would rather have that phone call and show you that, and show your team and train your team and help you do that, because that would get you closer to crafting and serving your church quicker than, you going and watching 50 hours of YouTube videos trying to figure it out. So
yeah, good. Steve, always a pleasure, man. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right, as we wrap this week, here's your church visuals tip of the week. The details of how you manage and present your visuals matter. Those little details take work in the background. It's work that no one sees, but that you do because you care about your craft and you care about giving your best. Well, thanks so much for checking us out this week. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and get more free training at churchvisuals.com. If you want to reach the people you want to reach for Jesus, your visuals matter. I'll see you next week. Your Visuals Matter has been a podcast presentation of Church Visuals. Executive produced by Carl Barnhill. Edited by AJ Schubert. Title and show graphics by Angie Lomas. For more resources to help you visually communicate the gospel, visit churchvisuals.com.